Welcome, everybody. It may not be tax season, but I'm still bringing you nothing but the tea in taxes. I'm your host, Giovanni Pryor, tax enrolled agent, and this is Life in the Tax Lane. And on this show, we talk about everything trending in today's news. I mean, from stimulus payments to sales tax, you name it. So let's start the conversation. You have successfully sued someone, and now you've won your court case, and you got to pay your lawyer. You have to pay all of these legal fees before you see a dollar. And then comes this 1099 reporting form that requiring you as a taxpayer to claim the entire award amount on your taxes. What now? Well, let's begin with the fact that taxes depend on the origin of claim. So, for example, if you got laid off at work and you sue your employer seeking wages, you'll be taxed as wages. And of course, possibly depending on the award, some of that pay will be issued on a Form 1099 for emotional distress as well. But if you sue for damage to your condo by a negligent building contractor, your damages may not be income. You may even be able to treat the recovery as a reduction in your purchase price of your condo. The rules are full of exceptions and nuances and just confusion, right? And so you have to be careful of how you treat your damage award settlements after 2018. So, I want to talk about Dwayne Johnson, who a jury awarded $289 million from getting cancer from Monsanto's Roundup weed killer. Now, before Mr. Johnson can even celebrate, he needs to consider under the former President Trump's tax bill of 2018, there is a new tax on litigation settlements in the form of no tax deductions for legal fees. Now, isn't it crazy that so many legal fees can't be deducted? Mr. Johnson has to pay taxes on all of the money, right, that his attorney collects from him out of this award settlement. It doesn't matter that the attorney must also pay tax on the same money. Sounds like double taxation without representation. But anyway, Mr. Johnson was awarded $39 million in compensatory damages and another $250 million in punitive damages. The combined legal fees and costs that Mr. Johnson might have to pay is up to 50%, right? So if he gets to keep half, it's $19.5 million of the compensatory damages. And since that was for his claim of cancer, that part is actually non-taxable at all. Now, the $250 million punitive award, well, $125 million would go towards legal fees and his lawyer and all those costs, right? And he would keep $125 million himself. So before taxes, his net take-home award would be $144.5 million. Yet after taxes, that $250 million in punitive damages that are going to be taxable fully to Mr. Johnson would require him to pay $92.5 million to the IRS. Yikes. And that's just for federal tax purposes. The state is going to want their cut too. And he's in California. And so, you do the math on state tax rate on $250 million is another $30 million or so. And so literally, Mr. Johnson would be left with roughly $20 million. The Trump tax law erased tax deductions for the legal fees. Compensatory damages for physical injuries or physical sickness will still be deductible. But exactly what injuries are physical and, qualifiable can sometimes seem like which came first, the chicken or the egg. If you're the person that's suing someone, right, and you're paying your lawyer with a contingent fee, the IRS is going to treat you as having received 100% of that money. It doesn't care that you gave 33 1/3% or maybe even 45% to your lawyer. They don't care, right? Now, because of that, you can be taxed on more money than you actually probably are going to collect. And so there's going to be a loophole to every rule, right? If the lawsuit concerns your trade or your business, then it's a business expense and it is still completely and fully deductible, which is great. But if you're an individual, sorry, you don't get to take that route. Now, settlements that involve claims against your employer, or maybe they're a whistleblower claim, those legal fees are also still deductible. But settlement advice really, you need to get advice on the taxation of damage awards when you are facing a settlement and it looks like you're going to win, preferably before your case settles. Sometimes you can justify allocation of legal fees that's like not strictly pro rata, but you need to document it. And guess what? The IRS, they don't have to agree with you either. Like, there's no rule that says they have to. Awards of pre or post judgment interest on those award amounts can produce the same tax problems as punitive damages, with no deduction for legal fees. So meanwhile, the person that's being sued, like Monsanto, they can write off this whole $289 million on their taxes, and Mr. Johnson gets to only claim a potential net take-home of less than $20 million. Like, who knew lawsuits worked out this way? Yikes. Now, what are some legal settlements that are not taxable? Well, physical injury awards are usually non-taxable. The IRS doesn't tax settlement awards from personal injury lawsuits if these cases demonstrate observable bodily harm. So if the injuries are visible, the IRS considers compensation money awarded because of those injuries to be tax-free. You won't have to include that portion of the settlement amount when you file your taxes. But pay attention, okay? Because while money awarded for physical injuries and physical sickness are tax-free, symptoms of emotional distress are not physical. So if you're suing for physical injuries, your damage awards are tax-free, right? But before 1996, all personal damages were like tax-free. So emotional distress and defamation, they produced tax-free settlement amounts. Guess it was probably pretty popular during that time to sue people. But after 1996, your injury had to be, physical, right? And so if you sued for intentional infliction of emotional distress, your award amount is taxable. Physical symptoms of emotional distress like stomach aches and headaches are considered taxable, but physical injury and sickness is not, right? The rules can confuse the best of us. Now, if your ex-employer, if you sued your ex-employer and you received like an extra $20,000 because they gave you an ulcer, is that ulcer considered to be physical or merely a symptom of emotional distress? It's really going to determine if that $20,000 is taxable or tax-free. Also, if the person that's being sued issued an IRS Form 1099 for the entire amount of the settlement, who are you left to argue with? Like, haggling over tax details before you sign off on a settlement is going to be your best route every time. Now, car accident injury settlements are almost always non-taxable. Any major claims a car accident lawyer settles, such as cases handled by personal injury lawyers, are an exception to any settlement award that is considered income. Now, I mentioned that those legal fees can be taxed if a lawyer chooses to work for contingency fees, where the attorney collects fees after he won your case. However, that's not the case with car accident cases or other personal injury cases like slip and fall cases or workers' compensation cases. Those contingency fees will not be taxable. So you don't have to include that part of the settlement on your tax return unless you also incurred medical expenses that got reimbursed from the previous year. So Before I delve into that further, I want to tell you all that if you're in need of tax resolution, Syndicate Tax is here to help. Because if you've got non-filed tax returns, if you've got like a pile of collection notices just sitting on your desk, if you're under audit and you just need representation, we do offer free 30-minute consultations with an enrolled agent on staff. And we can help make a plan to end your IRS worries for good. But you have to give us a call today, because remember, we can't help you if you don't give us a call. So give us a call at 502-220-4868. Now we're going to move on to medical expenses. Medical expenses are non-taxable if no tax deduction was taken previously, okay? So medical visits for like emotional distress or physical injury are non-taxable if you did not take an itemized deduction for those expenses in a prior year. So like if you settle and then you get reimbursed for medical expenses after you took that deduction, then you're going to be required to pay a tax that year. This is a specific IRS rule called the tax benefit rule. Most people don't know about it because you don't know about it until it applies to you, right? So if a taxpayer recovers an expense or some sort of loss that he previously wrote off in a prior year's income or against a prior year's income, then the recovered amount is going to be included in the current year's gross income. And you're going to include that reimbursement part of the settlement as other income on your 1040. Now, emotional distress awards are non-taxable. Any settlement money received for emotional distress is non-taxable if the distress or the anguish originated from the physical injury or sickness that was caused by the accident, right? However, you got to remember, any medical expenses, again, if you incurred some medical expenses, those are going to be subjected to that tax benefit rule, and no deduction will be taxable when the settlement is reached. And then the deduction will be taxable when the settlement is reached. But any emotional distress that is not caused by any physical injury from the accident will be taxable. So the distinction has to be made. Now, on the flip side, right, of this coin, we have taxable legal settlements. So let's begin with punitive damages and interest, which subsequently are taxable as income when received. So this is where things can get somewhat complicated. Any prejudgment or post-judgment interest on settlement money that is taxable, right? And it may influence taxes on some of those attorney fees. Now, the same can be said for any punitive damages that are awarded. Listen, punitive damages and interest are always taxable. Always. Okay? If you are injured in a car crash and you get $50,000 in compensatory damages and $5 million in punitive damages, only the $50,000 is tax-free. Okay? The $5 million is fully taxable. And you can have trouble deducting those attorney fees. Imagine paying an attorney between 33 and a third up to 50% of your total settlement award, and you're responsible to pay taxes on it. Like the same occurs with the interest. You might receive a tax-free settlement or judgment, but pre-judgment or post-judgment interest is always taxable, and it can produce attorney fee problems. That can make it attractive to settle your case rather than have it go to a judgment. But I'm not an attorney. I'm an enrolled agent. It means that I'm not an expert in the law. I'm an expert in tax law and how it affects you. Now, a much more common thing is lost wages, which if you guys are paying attention, you saw this coming, they are taxable as income. Now, lost wages are considered taxable because wages are income that would have been taxed if they were never interrupted, right? So not only will income tax be added, but these wages, they are also subject to Social Security taxes as well as Medicare tax. I said early on in the show that if you get laid off at work and sue your employer seeking wages, you will be taxed as having received wages. So there is that. Now, what do you do? What do you need to know when you're filing your taxes and you've received such a judgment or settlement damage award, right? Well, first, determining how to file your taxes when you receive compensation, it takes assessment, right? Careful assessment. You need to identify how your settlement payment was processed to be able to file your taxes correctly. You have to review all of your court-related documents, any relevant documentation to the court case. It's crucial whenever your personal injury case has been settled that you keep track of all of the documents that are concerning your compensation payment. And you want to make sure it doesn't get lost, because you're going to need to know, was the payment placed as income in whole or in part? Was the payment placed as wages in whole or in part? Do you have the proper reporting forms? Like, did they 1099 you? Did you get a W-2? Did you receive a settlement check, or are you receiving scheduled payments? And what was the amount of the legal fees that you paid? It's also important to keep in mind that if you have two claims against someone that you are suing, and you settle for both, you need to indicate the amount for each. Okay, let me give you a better example, because I think I said that kind of choppy. If one claim is for personal injury related and the other is non-personal injury claim, one settlement is excluded from taxation and the other is not. So if you have no documentation about the amounts for each claim, the IRS is going to challenge the non-taxability of your settlement. So it's crucial to identify which settlement amount is personal injury related, mainly because that settlement will more often than not be a much more significant amount than the non-personal injury claim settlement. When you settle your case with your attorney, you can have that documentation specific to outline the different compensation amounts, so it's easier for you to follow and read. And allocating damages, it can really save on taxes. Most legal disputes involve multiple issues, right? It's not always about just one thing. You might claim that the defendant kept your laptop, stole your money, or underpaid you, or failed to reimburse you for some out-of-pocket expenses. Even if your dispute relates to one course of conduct, there's a good chance that the total settlement involves several types of consideration, right? So it's best that you guys are agreeing on the tax treatment. And, such agreements aren't binding in the IRS or the courts in later tax disputes, but they're not ignored by the IRS either, because the IRS will consider all of the relevant facts on a case-by-case basis. But they can't consider jack squat if you don't keep your documentation. Now, attorney fees, they're a tax trap. Now, no shade to your attorney, okay? I'm sure they put in the work to win your settlement, and they deserve the money that you are supposed to pay them. However, if you are the one suing someone and you used a contingent fee lawyer, you'll usually be treated, for tax purposes, as receiving 100% of the money that was awarded by you and your attorney, even if the person that you sued paid your lawyer directly his contingent fee cut. If your case is fully non-taxable, like a auto accident or a slip and fall case in which you're injured, then there's no tax consequences and you have nothing to worry about. But if your award is taxable, you need to watch out, because let's say that you settle a court case for $100,000. You give your lawyer 40% for his fees, and you think you have $60,000 of income. Instead, you have $100,000 of income. And in 2005, the U.S. Supreme Court They already upheld the Commissioner versus Banks case that said if you as a plaintiff have income equal to 100% of your recoveries, even if your lawyer takes a share, okay, you're not going to be able to win that one in court. It's already been shot down. So when attempting to deduct those legal fees, you definitely need to be careful. In 2004, Congress enacted an above-the-line deduction for legal fees, right? But don't get this confused with the above-the-line deduction that we can take for charitable deductions, like everybody gets it. This isn't one of those things. This is where it's a deduction for legal fees in employment claims or certain whistleblower claims. That's the only deduction that kind of still remains. But outside of these two areas, there's big trouble when you have won a substantial court case judgment and you paid out a substantial amount of legal fees, but you're the one paying tax on it as if you kept every dollar. Now, it's just because there were a lot of great things that came out of the Tax Cuts Jobs Act in 2018 under former President Trump. I'm going to be the first one to say it. But one of the bad things was that new tax on litigation settlements, which is no deduction for legal fees. Like, no tax deduction for legal fees comes as a bizarre and unpleasant surprise for those of us that have actually won some real money, because it whittles it down to peanuts. And it seems like everyone else wins, and IRS included, except the plaintiff. Now, I say get tax advice early, right? Before your case settles and before the settlement agreement is signed is essential. Now, that's going to be it for our show today, folks. And as always, if you need tax professional, if you want more information about something that I talked about on air, be sure to follow me on social media. Check out our company website at www.syndicatetax.net. You can view our services. We offer 4 ways to file your taxes, and we've got multiple locations in Louisville. But if you need immediate assistance, you can give me a call today at 502-220-4868 or email me directly at jill@syndicatetax.net. Thanks for listening, guys, and until next time.